Commend it to the House.
I call the Honourable Annette King.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Labour, as we have already heard from Grant Robertson, wholeheartedly supports the National War Memorial Park Pukeahu Empowering Bill. Unfortunately, I think it was unfortunate, however, that the Honourable Chris Finlayson went straight into criticism of 2008. It is unfortunate because he really just couldn't help himself. He couldn't recognise that there is a broad consensus for this bill, and I have to say that I will never forget his comments to a former Mayor of Wellington after the 2008 election that he was not going to progress Helen Clark's project. She was not going to get any credit for this.
That's what it was about.
And that, in fact, what it was about in terms of this delay. And I think it's most unfortunate. There has been now a 4-year delay, and we need this legislation to be able to ensure that it is in place for 2015. And so that it can be opened for Anzac Day 2015 for the 100th commemoration of Gallipoli. But we will support this bill because it is important. It's important to all New Zealanders. It's certainly important to our service men and women. The recognition, a place where you can go and acknowledge the sacrifice made by men and women, not just at Gallipoli, but in the many conflicts that New Zealand has been involved in. But I want to pay a tribute to the Right Honourable Helen Clark, because it was her vision. I don't think I have met another Member of Parliament who has driven harder to acknowledge and commemorate and respect the soldiers and service people of New Zealand. She had a passion that came out of her own family background, that she had had great uncles, she had had family members who had served in war and had lost their lives. And this passion came through in many of the decisions that were made by the Cabinet between 2000 and 2008. And one of those decisions, which has led to the decision to have the National War Memorial where it is placed, was the Tomb of the Unknown Warrior. And many of us will remember the day, the 10th of November 2004, when the New Zealand Defence Force brought home the unknown warrior. There was a welcoming ceremony at Parliament, and the unknown warrior was honoured with campaign medals of 2 world wars, an operational service medal, the Royal New Zealand Service and Return and Service Association's highest award, a badge in gold. About 10,000 people, New Zealanders, queued to pay their respect for the unknown warrior lying in state here at Parliament. Then the following day, on Armistice Day, after a memorial service at the Cathedral of St Paul, the unknown warrior was accorded a full military funeral procession through Wellington to the final interment ceremony at the National War Memorial. It's estimated that around 100,000 New Zealanders lined the street that day to honour the unknown warrior and taken to a place that is now to become our National War Memorial Park. That is fitting. Many countries have such places where people can go and remember, and now we will have one. To April 2015. It does mean, because of the delay, that we're having to use legislation. It does mean that we have legislation that has, as part of it, the use of order in council, and that is not always ideal. And there is also always some resistance and feelings of it's not quite right to have to use order in council. And I understand those who feel uneasy, but I would say to them that I think the changes that have been made will ensure that there are safeguards put in place so that the use of that order in council will be done sparingly, that it will only be done as a last resort. and I would urge all parties in this House to join together to support this legislation so that those who are listening to this debate and those who look to us to give leadership when it comes to those who have made sacrifices for this country, they can see that we are a united Parliament in wanting to honour them. I think we can take comfort from the changes that were made, that were suggested by Labour and secured at the Select Committee. As you heard from Grant Robertson, the changes mean that the Order in Council can only be used as a last resort. Every other thing must be considered. All other reasonable and practical ways must be considered and looked at before an Order in Council is used. There's also a requirement, which I think is a very sensible one, that any decisions that are made by the review panel have to report to the Parliament every 6 months. Also, that they have extended the consideration of orders and councils to 12 sitting days. And so I think with those changes, it has given some security to those who were worried about the use of order in council. Let us get over that and look to how we can make this work. And one of the ways it will work well is by extending the role of the body who is deciding. And the formation of a community forum, I think, is a really great idea. You see, too often in this place, we seem to often think that we know best, that we know how things should work, that we have the knowledge at our fingertips. But from my experience over the years, I have found that often the best ideas and the best solutions come from the community itself. Those who live in that community experience what is happening in that community. And a community forum that can come together and say, this is how we think it should be going, this is how it should be designed, this is what it will mean to us, this is what the impact will be, I think is a very, very sound idea indeed. I gather it's to meet 4 times a year, and there is some thought that this should be more often than 4 times, and maybe initially it could be more often than 4 times a year. Perhaps there would be a need for it to meet every month to begin with. We shouldn't restrict how often they meet in a tight time frame and straitjacket, but rely on what needs to be done and what discussions need to be held. So this is a bill that is going to, when it's passed, allow for this part to proceed with speed. There is a lot of work to be done, but if I was going to make any criticism apart from this criticism I've already made, is that I do think the Minister of Transport ought to rethink what happens beyond the park, because they're planning for the road beyond the underground tunnelling of Buckle Street is a dog's breakfast. So we're going to end up with a road, someone's called it a circus road, I think it's actually a roller coaster road, where we go up and down, because the thinking beyond the Buckle Street leading up to the tunnel has not been thought through by NZTA working with culture and heritage. We ought not to have a flyover around the Basin Reserve, and I would rather us wait and get it right than to rush ahead with a flyover that I think actually will detract from the Memorial Park. And that is something the government needs to think about. Don't be driven by the agenda of NZTA and some need to have roads of national significance in place. Think about this park, what we're trying to do here, what we're trying to commemorate, the significance of it. And think about the road beyond it if it is going to detract from it. It's certainly going to detract from a transport and a flow of traffic solution that goes into my electorate through the Mount Vic Tunnel. They'll be able to get very fast to the Mount Vic Tunnel through a flyover, only to reach a tunnel that goes just one way for each line of traffic. So I support this bill, Labour supports this bill, and as we have done from the time of its introduction, we have supported and assisted to make sure that it is passed and this park can proceed and be ready for April 2015.
I call the honourable member